The anime starts with Nasa Yuzaki being run over on a snowy night as he lies losing consciousness. He hears the voice of a beautiful pink-haired girl telling him that he will be okay. And he can't help but remember how his life led him to this moment. It all started when he was born. His parents named him Nasa, therefore every time someone learned his name, they laughed at him. To stop that from happening again, Nasa promised himself to be more than Nasa itself, and that led him to study a lot and apply to a prestigious college. One night, he was coming home late and saw a girl with pink hair so beautiful that he didn't look both ways before crossing the street, and he ended up getting run over. In the present, he is badly injured, and the truck driver makes him see that the pink-haired girl is also badly injured, but she just walks away. Caught up in adrenaline, Nasa runs after the girl and finds her waiting for the bus, but she is not injured anymore. She immediately covers him with her shawl, and he can't help but think that she's the cutest girl he's ever met in his life. She says that she'll call an ambulance, and he doesn't let her go, even though he's very hurt. He tells her that according to legend, if someone finds Kaguya and loves her, they shouldn't let her go, and she tells him that they can be together if they get married, and he happily accepts and then faints. When Nasa wakes up, it's already spring, and the next few months of his life are spent in rehabilitation and catching up on his studies. Unfortunately, he couldn't take the college entrance exam, so he lost almost 2 years. The next year, when he managed to graduate, he received several invitations from college, but he declined them all and dedicated himself to work in the hope of seeing the pink-haired girl. Then he moved to live alone so as not to worry his parents. What Nasa didn't know is that his life was about to change. One night, the pink-haired girl knocks on his door. She is Tsukasa. Just as she promised, she came willingly to get married. She even brought the marriage registration. This shocks Nasa so much that Tsukasa thinks he regretted it. But it's not like that. He immediately signs the marriage registration just by seeing her smile, and Tsukasa takes him to the nearest police station to register their marriage. On the way, Nasa realizes that she has not laughed at his name even once, and she says that the story of how Nasa managed to send the first man to the moon is proof that everything is possible with effort for her. Nasa is a spectacular name, and that takes away the thorn that has been in Nasa's heart since he was able to reason. At the police station, Tsukasa hands over her marriage registration, and since she is a minor, she also hands over her guardian's signed consent. Since all the paperwork is in order, the marriage goes through without a hitch. After that, they receive a potted plant as a gift, and Tsukasa offers his hand, and Nasa takes it, blushing and happy beyond belief. He is so happy that he squeezes her hand very tightly, and they go holding hands to his home. Near Nasa's house, Tsukasa tells him that she has to go somewhere else first, while Nasa can't stop thinking that he only has one bed for the two of them. As soon as Nasa arrives home, he starts to panic just thinking about how small his bed is. An hour later, Tsukasa arrives with her suitcase, and Nasa panics even more because that means they will live together from now on. But she sees him so nervous that she suggests that she can go sleep in a hotel. Then Nasa asks her why she married him, and she asks him the same thing, and he blushes and says that he married her because he loves her, and she answers the same but refuses to tell him when she fell in love with him. Then she prepares to go to a hotel, but a strange feeling grips Nasa's heart. He feels that if she leaves, he will never see her again, and begs her not to go and suggests going to buy a futon for her. At the department store, Nasa explains the properties of each futon, and he feels like they are on a date, so he takes her hand and she squeezes it, and they continue looking at futons. After buying it, they return home, and Nasa's nerves get the better of him again, especially when she tells him that he doesn't have things for girls, so he runs to the convenience store to buy her everything a girl needs. She thanks him, and the two of them go to sleep, she on the futon and he on his bed. Hours pass, and Nasa can't sleep, and even less when he sees that Tsukasa is a restless sleeper. She moves, ruffles her hair, and kicks off her blankets. Then Nasa gets up to cover her so she doesn't get cold, and stops for a moment to think about whether he should give her a goodnight kiss, but then thinks that he would like their first kiss to be awake. He goes back to his bed, but Tsukasa starts to move again. She sleepwalks and drinks water and then pulls the blanket off of him. The next morning, Tsukasa wakes up confused and almost takes off her pajamas in front of him, so he runs to the bathroom. After that, she puts on an apron like any wife, and he thinks it's the cutest thing in the world, and blushing, the two decide to call each other by their names since they both share his last name now. Armed with her wife's apron, Tsukasa makes a delicious breakfast, leaving Nasa speechless, who was used to only eat in hot pot because it has all the nutrients a man needs. After that, the two go to the bathhouse, but not before buying all kinds of feminine products such as hair creams and body lotions. When they arrive at the bathhouse, they are greeted by Kaname, one of Nasa's kuhai, who is surprised to see him with the girl since she always believed that he was not interested in them, and when Nasa tells her that Tsukasa is his wife, Kaname almost faints and decides to let her go in for free as a wedding gift. But that doesn't work for Nasa. She demands that he tell her if her sister Aya already knows about this, and he doesn't understand why he should tell Aya, which frustrates Kaname. Then the blue-haired girl asks him if he plans to have a ceremony, and he says no. Then she asks him if he bought her a ring, and he sheepishly says no. Frustrated, she asks if he proposed to her, and he shyly says no either. Angry, Kaname says his duty as a husband is to make his wife happy. That will make up for the lack of everything else, and he passionately says that he will make Tsukasa happy because he loves her. Unfortunately, this is overheard by Tsukasa, who says that it is embarrassing for him to shout it like that, but still, it makes her happy. After that, the two go in to bathe, but Nasa feels like going to spy on his wife, but is stopped by Kaname, who shames his size. On the other hand, Tsukasa was happy to have the bath to herself until she bumps into a blue-haired girl. She claims to be the eldest daughter of the bathhouse owner. This is Aya, a strange girl. She keeps apologizing and babbling about how she will make it up to her for interrupting her and ends up washing Tsukasa's back. Later, Tsukasa wakes up Nasa, who had fallen asleep on the massage chair, and sees his wife coming with Aya, and Tsukasa realizes that the two of them are good friends, and Aya tells her that the bathhouse used to be in trouble until Nasa helped them with legal paperwork and making better budgeting decisions. On the way home, Nasa tells Tsukasa that in middle school, Aya was very popular, but now she is prettier, and that makes Tsukasa hesitate. She also wants to be called pretty, but as they were passing by a church in which a couple was getting married, Nasa takes her hesitation as a sign that she is angry because there was no ceremony, no ring, and no proposal. Then he asks her for a little more time to solve everything and runs away. Without understanding what happened, Tsukasa returns home without realizing that she was being spied on by a blonde girl. She is Chitose, and she loves Tsukasa very much as if they were family. She knocks on the door where she saw her enter, and the pink-haired girl treats her formally, saying that she is now married and will visit her one day. Chitose almost faints upon hearing the news and tells her that her grandmother Tokiko is very worried about her, but Tsukasa says that she only brings her problems and closes the door. Crying, Chitose sits on the stairs, and when Nasa arrives, he gives her a handkerchief to dry her tears. She tells him that a friend does not want to return home, and on top of that, she got married without telling them. Suddenly, Tsukasa opens the door because she heard her husband's voice, and Chitose burns with fury when she realizes that Nasa is the husband of her beloved Tsukasa. She is very angry, but Tsukasa is so conciliatory that he tells her that her anger is valid and invites her to have tea at home to get to know each other better, but instead, she snaps her fingers and a man appears, grabs Nasa, ties his hands, and throws him in a car. Chitose gets in the car too and takes him to her huge mansion. There, she tells him that she plans to dissolve their marriage in the most effective way and calls her maids Charlotte and Aurora. Chitose tells them that she needs pictures of him being a worthless husband. Charlotte then starts to take off her clothes, but is quickly stopped by Aurora and Chitose. Thanks to that distraction, Nasa escapes from them and hides in a room that mysteriously smells like Tsukasa. There he sees a display case where there is a stone, which is maintained by oxygen and nitrogen to avoid its oxidation. He concludes that it is really a moonstone. Suddenly, the door opens and Charlotte enters with a huge sword and scolds him for touching things that do not belong to him, and as he manages to move at the last moment, Charlotte hits the moonstone display case. Aurora and Chitose panic because it is a very important moonstone, but fortunately, Nasa is a genius, and with a bit of tape, he patches the display case and regulates the necessary amounts of oxygen and nitrogen. Chitose says that her grandmother brought that moonstone to comfort Tsukasa and reminds her of home, and that confuses Tsukasa so much that Chitose realizes that Nasa knows nothing about Tsukasa. She flares up in anger again and can't believe that he got married without knowing the truth about Tsukasa. Then, Charlotte unexpectedly hugs him and Aurora takes pictures of them. At the speed of light, Aurora photoshops the photos and makes them look scandalous. To top it all off, at that moment, Tsukasa arrives and sees the photos and takes Nasa away to scold him in private, or so Nasa thinks. In reality, she is helping him escape. She takes him through a secret passageway in the mansion that leads to a church on a hill. The church is so beautiful that Nasa decides to propose to her right there. They are already married, but that doesn't stop him from opening his heart, promising her a happy marriage and sealing their promise with a kiss. Days later, Tsukasa notices that Nasa doesn't have a TV, which is a big problem because she wants to watch her favorite movie today, but it turns out that Nasa doesn't watch movies, series, or shows. This leaves Tsukasa so stunned that she tries to explain to him the importance of watching movies. For example, one day, she will want to see the long-awaited sequel of a movie, and she will want him to accompany her to the cinema. Then he decides to go buy a TV for her, which makes her happy, so she asks for a cheap one, but he wants a good one so she can enjoy her movies. The next day, they go to the bathhouse, and while Tsukasa bathes, Nasa tells Kaname about his romantic moment with Tsukasa at the church, but that doesn't satisfy Kaname. She wants to know if he already gave his wife a ring. Since that's not the case, Kaname scolds him, saying that wives need 3 things: trips to the hot springs to relax, dinners out to avoid cooking, and most of all, they like to receive jewelry. Nasa can't believe he doesn't know about those things, but he forgets everything when he runs into Tsukasa fresh out of the bath. After that, they walk home and he tells her that he has to go to work today and will return at night, which makes her a little sad, so she suggests going to the park to sit for a while. There they silently observe the lake and the ducks. He thinks that she feels lonely, so he tentatively gives her a kiss. All of this is observed by Aurora and Charlotte, who were sent by Chitose. Later, Nasa can't stop thinking about Tsukasa and wishes to have something to look at to remember her by, and realizes that Kenan was right. They need engagement rings as proof of their love. When he gets home, he tells Tsukasa that he wants to buy her engagement rings, but she says that it's not necessary because they're already married and married couples wear wedding rings, but she considers it a waste of money. He keeps insisting that they are necessary, so Tsukasa takes him the next day to a high-end jewelry store to scare him with the high prices of a diamond. Nasa's heart almost leaves his body when he sees the price of diamond rings, but just thinking about Tsukasa's smile, he almost buys one if it weren't for Tsukasa, who stops him and takes him out of the jewelry store. They sit in the park and he, still terrified by the prices of diamonds, keeps stammering that he wants one. So she takes him to a cheaper jewelry store, and although the rings are cheaper, he wants to buy the best one. So she takes him out of the jewelry store again and takes him to the park and asks him why he is obsessed with buying rings, and he says that he doesn't want her to feel alone while he works. Touched by her husband's big heart, she gives him a kiss on the cheek and agrees to buy rings, but chooses the cheapest ones in the jewelry store and says that every time she looks at these rings, she will remember how kind and how much her husband loves her. That night, Nasa didn't sleep at all because Tsukasa changed her sleepwalking routine. Instead of taking off his coat like every night, she lay down next to him, and when he hugged her, she kissed him 3 times before going back to her futon. In the morning, Nasa can't stop thinking about how great it would be to sleep with his wife every night, so he wants to buy a double bed. But for that, they would have to move. Then he tells Tsukasa his idea, and she says she doesn't want to move because she likes this apartment. After that, they go to the bathhouse, and since Kanemi sees him looking through real estate magazines, she assumes that he's about to move. But he tells her that Tsukasa doesn't want to, and Kanemi understands, although she says that she would beat her future husband if he forced her to sleep on the floor and live in a tiny apartment. Throughout the day, Nasa thinks about this, and when he gets home, he catches Tsukasa changing clothes, causing them both to be embarrassed. He then takes her to the park and tells her the 3 reasons why they need to move. First, they would have a huge living room where they could show the movies she loves so much. Second, they would have space to put a shelving to store all the DVDs they buy. And lastly, their room will be so big that they could buy a double bed in which they will sleep holding hands. This convinces Tsukasa, but she realizes that they need a guarantor, and he says that he will ask his parents, which makes him realize that he has not told his parents about his marriage. Embarrassed, he calls his mother and tells her that he got married, causing his mother to make sounds that he never heard, and he tells her that his wife is the cute girl that saved him from the accident. The next day, Nasa's mom texts him saying that she's realized that he needs a guarantor since his apartment is too small for 2 people, so she threatens him saying that they won't be his guarantors until they visit them. All of this is heard by Aurora and Charlotte, who run to tell Chitose about this, and they think that if they go to Nara, it will be like a honeymoon. Coincidentally, Nasa thinks the same thing. If they travel to Nara, they could make a stop in Kyoto as a honeymoon, and that seems like a great idea to Tsukasa, but first, she wants a camera. He thinks that she wants to photograph their honeymoon, but she says she wants photos of them to make a diary of their marriage and their happy moments. To Nasa, that seems like a great idea, so he starts taking a photo of Tsukasa in front of the lake, but something awakens in him, and he starts taking many more photos. So Tsukasa takes the camera from him and takes a picture of him, saying it's to remember the day her husband improvised a photo shoot of her in the park. After that, they pack up and go to the bus station. She prefers to take a bus instead of a train because she thinks it's great to travel such long distances in one night when before that same trip could take weeks. Also, she's intrigued about the night service areas. As soon as they get on the bus, she falls asleep, which is impossible for Nasa because the seats are too hard for him. 2 hours later, the bus stops at the service area, and Nasa's body feels like an old man's because of the seats, but he soon recovers because Tsukasa wants to go to the service areas. Meanwhile, they are observed by Chitose, Aurora, and Charlotte, who are following them. Chitose is willing to do anything to break up that marriage. Unfortunately for Chitose, the newlyweds get along very well. When Nasa forgets his wallet, she doesn't get mad. Instead, she goes with him to look for it. Later in the service area, she orders a bowl of udon with limes, and it's not very good, which causes him to take many photos of her while she chews the lime. That does make her mad, but instead of fighting, she tells her husband that he should make it up to her, and he says that she can choose what he'll eat, and they can share, so she chooses a melon bread. Meanwhile, in the shadows, Chitose gets mad because they seem to get along very well, as Aurora and Charlotte said. Frustrated, Chitose approaches Tsukasa when Nasa goes to the bathroom. She can't believe that she acts like a normal girl when she's not. but that's what Tsukasa wants, to be a normal girl. Suddenly, some reporters from the food ranking program for service areas appear and Tsukasa starts to hide, but luckily, her husband comes out of the bathroom and she takes his hand and takes him to the bus. The only thing Nasa manages to hear is Chitose screaming why Tsukasa would marry someone like him. On the bus, Tsukasa tells him not to pay attention to Chitose. She doesn't approve of their marriage and maybe that will happen with his parents too, but he assures her that he will convince them if they object. The next morning, they arrive to Kyoto and Nasa wants to go to museums before to go to his parents' house. And although Nasa is not interested in the museums or the antiquities of Kyoto, she agrees to go because Nasa seems very excited about it. First, they go to rent a kimono and she shows how skillful she is by putting it on by herself without help. Suddenly, Chitose and her maids appear and the blonde says that since she doesn't approve of their marriage, they can't go to Nasa's house. Nasa then proposes to spend time together today to convince her to bless this marriage. Chitose accepts and Tsukasa leaves with the maids for the most famous manga convention in Kyoto. Alone, Chitose says that he must treat her as his girlfriend today, and if he does well, she will consider giving them her approval. First, Nasa invites Chitose to go for a ride in a rickshaw while Tsukasa goes to a cafe with the maids. Charlotte asks her what she likes most about her husband, and she blushing says that he is very kind, cute, and always compliments people when he introduces them. On the other hand, Chitose and Nasa enjoy their rickshaw ride and then go out to eat dangos. He shows her that he did his research on what to do in Kyoto, but when Tsukasa told him she wanted to go to cafes and manga stores, he panicked because he didn't know where to go. This makes Chitose angry. She says that he knows nothing about Tsukasa, but he tells her that according to the Drake equation, there is a 0.000034% chance of meeting the person you were meant to meet, and 2 years ago, when Tsukasa saved his life, he knew he had found that person. It was like meeting the person he was looking for since he was born, and even though Chitose met her first and knows more about Tsukasa than he does, he plans to love Tsukasa and get to know her throughout their marriage because their love is real. This leaves Chitose speechless, so she leaves without telling him if she approves of their marriage. At the end of the day, Tsukasa and Nasa meet at the train station and head to Nara. On the train, Nasa tells Tsukasa that his parents are weird, they used to live in Tokyo. But his dad decided to move to Nara for the archaeological sites, and his mother agreed because she wanted to see the deer in Nara. When they arrive, they are greeted by Nasa's mother, Mrs. Kanoka. She is very nervous to meet her daughter-in-law, as is Mr. Enishi, who has not stopped shaking all day. As soon as the four of them sit down, Mr. Enishi sends Nasa to take a bath because he wants to talk to his daughter-in-law alone. At first, Nasa doesn't want to leave, but Tsukasa asks him to, and he obeys. Later, Tsukasa tells him that his dad told her interesting things about him, but she doesn't want to tell him what. Before going to sleep, Mrs. Kanoka tells her son not to overdo it because they sleep next to each other and the walls are not soundproof. When Nasa realizes what his mother meant, he blushes and can't believe that he's sleeping with a girl and his parents in the next room. Since it's their first time sleeping on the same level, Nasa offers her his arm as a pillow and she accepts, making him happy for a few minutes. He can feel her body heat and her perfume, but soon his arm starts to go numb and she notices it. Even so, he insists on continuing to be her pillow. The only way he'll change his mind is if she kisses him, and she blushes and kisses him. Unfortunately for Nasa, this is overheard by his parents. The next morning, Tsukasa wakes up early and changes her clothes, not knowing that her husband was watching her. She then goes to watch the sunrise, as does Mr. Enishi, who is still nervous about having a daughter-in-law, so she remembers the archaeologist and asks him about his library, and he is delighted to show it to her. She looks through the books and finds a very old one saying that it would be very funny if someone studied romantic letters that she wrote in one night. He is amazed and asks her if she understands those writings, and she says no. When Nasa enters his father's library, he thanks her for being kind to his dad even though she doesn't like ancient and historical things, and she blushes, saying that she likes them a lot. After that, Tsukasa says that according to logic, if she adds museum plus Nasa, the result will be fun. Besides, they weren't together in Kyoto, so she wants to make up for it. First, they go to see the Buddha statue and then to the Horyuji castles. She knows a lot about the history of these castles, and he is surprised because he thought she didn't like history, but she says she has a good memory. After taking selfies like a couple in love, Nasa suggests going to the Haijo Palace, but she says there is nothing there. Still, they go, and as she said, there is nothing. The palace no longer exists, and she tells him how the castle was destroyed and a small replica was built in its place. He listens to her in amazement. Despite not liking history, she is well informed about everything. And not only that, she melancholically says that 1300 years ago in that castle lived many people, but there is no trace of them anymore, and that is very sad. But thanks to today's technology, that no longer happens, and she starts taking photos of him. She says that she takes pictures for her and his father since he made her promise something. It turns out that last night when Mr. Enishi asked to talk to Tsukasa alone, he bowed to her and thanked her from the bottom of his heart for saving his son 2 years ago. For him and his wife, Nasa is their pride and joy, and they almost lost him if it wasn't for Tsukasa, so that's why they are very happy that she married Nasa. And lastly, he asked her to always take care of his son, and Tsukasa promised him. Later, Nasa and Tsukasa say goodbye to them and promise to visit soon. The next day, they arrive in Tokyo and find a surprise when they get home. It turns out that lightning struck Nasa's apartment and burned it to the ground. The only thing that was saved was his wedding flower pot. Tsukasa is surprised at how kind and gentle her husband is. Instead of getting angry at a misfortune, he takes the news calmly, thinking of the quickest solutions. Also, he keeps all his legal papers in his safe so he didn't lose anything important. After that, they go to the bathhouse, and when Kaname finds out what happened, she offers them to stay in one of the houses that are not in use. Nasa is happy about how lucky they are to find a place to stay so quickly, but Tsukasa says that it's not luck, but that he is so kind and well-liked that others are willing to help him. As Tsukasa settles in, Nasa goes to thank Aya and Mrs. Arizugawa for letting them stay, although Aya is so oblivious that she hasn't realized yet that Nasa and Tsukasa are married. Kaname can't believe how dim-witted her sister is because she still thinks Nasa and Tsukasa are cousins. Luckily, Mrs. Arisugawa makes it clear that they are married, and Aya screams in disbelief. She has a crush on Nasa, but now her first love ended as quickly as it began. But Kaname says that she never said anything, so it was obvious that Nasa would never notice her. Aya then acknowledges that her sister is right and congratulates Nasa on his marriage. Days later, Tsukasa tells Nasa that they should do laundry because she doesn't have any clean clothes left, and most of them burned in the fire. So in the afternoon, they go to the laundromat, and she is surprised at how cool it is. The next day, Kaname scolds Nasa for not taking his wife to buy clothes after the fire, and he realizes that she is right. But when he tells Tsukasa about it, she says that women's clothes are really expensive. But he doesn't care, he just wants to see his wife wearing cute clothes. They go to the department store, and although Tsukasa picks out cute outfits, he thinks they are a little revealing, so she lets him choose the outfits, and Tsukasa is surprised by his good taste. Pleased with their purchases, she says that she has to buy underwear, which makes him blush, and although he doesn't want to enter the store for fear that it is illegal, she takes his hand and leaves him sitting in a corner so that he can wait with her. He marvels at the amount of underwear models there are and can't stop wondering which one his wife will buy. After shopping, Nasa can't stop staring at his wife's bag and works up the courage to ask her if he'll ever be able to see her in her underwear, and she blushes and says yes. Days later, Tsukasa and Nasa are still settling into married life, which is very easy because they get along, and she's an excellent cook, and he is happy with everything she does. One night, Kaname brings him a melon, which is so sweet that they feel grateful for the small joys of their daily life. The next day, Nasa receives a call from his landlord. He says that a new apartment complex is being built and offers him one of them, and the rent would be the same as he already had. Then Nasa and Tsukasa go to see the apartments that supposedly served as models for the new building, but as soon as they arrive, they think there was a mistake. The address took them to a luxurious building. The apartment is spacious, and the windows give a beautiful view of the city. It even has a bathtub for two, and the bed is a double. Nasa is delighted with the apartment and asks his wife if they will share a bed someday, and she says yes. In the afternoon, Nasa receives a text from his landlord admitting that he gave them the wrong address, and Nasa promises himself to work hard to live in an apartment like that one day. The next day, Tsukasa wakes up early and offers to help Kaname since she is just a 15-year-old girl who works very hard helping her mother run the bathhouse. Kaname is reluctant at first, but then gives in to Tsukasa's insistence and puts her to clean the men's bathrooms, and in no time, Tsukasa leaves the place shining. Tsukasa says that it was a difficult job, even though she had help from the robot that her husband put together, and congratulates Kaname for taking on so many tasks without complaining. After that, they go down to the boiler room, which was renovated by Nasa to save money and use coal instead of oil. And Kaname surprises Tsukasa by thanking her for saving Nasa. Thanks to him, her family was able to stay afloat, and thanks to Tsukasa, he is still alive. Later, Tsukasa asks her husband what his favorite food is, and he says that he likes curry, but they don't have curry powder, so they decide to take a night walk to the supermarket. Before leaving, Mrs. Arisugawa tells Nasa that at this time the park is special for couples who want to kiss, making them blush. They first go to the supermarket and end up buying garlic breads, and without realizing it, they end up in the park. He wants to kiss her, but Tsukasa is very conscious of her garlic breath, and even though he also ate garlic bread, he settles for hugging her from behind. She takes his hands and says that since she met him, she is experiencing new feelings and turns to hug him. Many new beginnings are thanks to him. Days later, Chitose and her maids go to visit Tsukasa and are shocked to see the empty place, and are even more shocked when they find out that a lightning bolt burned the entire house to the ground. At that moment, Chitose sees Tsukasa passing by and asks her where she lives, and the pink-haired girl lies to her that she lives in a park. And although Chitose believes her at first, she quickly tracks her down to the bathhouse. On the other hand, Chitose arrives home and finds Nasa rummaging through Kaneme's father's boxes of old junk, and he finds a strange tray, and Tsukasa says that it is used to make takoyaki, which gives them the idea to have a takoyaki party with their friends. Later, Chitose arrives at the bathhouse and meets Kaname, who doesn't let her look down on the bathhouse and lets her and the maids in for free. An hour later, the three of them are satisfied and relax and almost forget that they came to track Tsukasa. At that moment, Tsukasa and Nasa appear, and Chitose asks her why he prefers to live in a bathhouse and not in her mansion, and Tsukasa's answer is simple: here they have video game consoles. Perplexed, Chitose offers to buy her all kinds of game consoles, and this is overheard by Aya, who invites herself to live with Chitose to play video games. Seeing everyone gather, Nasa and Tsukasa invite them to a takoyaki party, which leads Aya to question Tsukasa's cooking abilities. According to her, if a girl can't cook, she can't be a wife. At night, everyone gathers at Tsukasa and Nasa's small house, who greet them with a lot of delicious food made by Tsukasa and the maids. Aya tries them, expecting them to taste horrible, but admits that everything is delicious. Then she says that a good wife should know how to play video games, and Tsukasa accepts the challenge, although first she wants to teach her husband how to play, but he is hopeless. Then the maids propose a contest. The one who wins can ask Nasa for anything she wants, and Chitose accepts, thinking of making him do something embarrassing, while Aya accepts, blushing, thinking of the possibilities, and finally, Tsukasa accepts to defend her husband's honor. The first round begins, and Aya mercilessly defeats Chitose, and although she asks for another chance, the result is the same. Then it's Tsukasa's turn to face Aya, and although Tsukasa is very good, she is beaten by Aya, and that makes her angry, saying that it's not fair because she hasn't played for a long time, and asks to change the console. She chooses a very old video game console, one of the first models of fighting video games, which was rebuilt by Nasa at Tsukasa's request. At first, Aya doesn't know how to manage the controls well and then loses against Tsukasa, but she's a born player and soon gets the hang of it, and the fight against Tsukasa is even. So much so that the match ends in a double knockout. After that, the two congratulate each other, and what started as a rivalry ended as a video game friendship. Then it's time to make the takoyakis, and Tsukasa teaches her husband how to make them, which is observed by Chitose, who admits to her maids that she doesn't accept this marriage, but she is happy that her beloved Tsukasa is happy. Later, when everyone has left, the newlyweds wash the dishes, and he asks her what she was going to order him if she won, and she kisses him unexpectedly, making him blush, and he says that she can kiss him whenever she wants. Days later, Nasa works fixing a virus attack system from his computer, and not only that, he works on 3 computers at once and spends all night restoring systems. The next morning, Tsukasa notices that he is red and takes his temperature. He is overheated and soon becomes dizzy. Clearly, he has a summer cold and needs to rest. As a good wife, she takes care of him even though he doesn't want her around because he could infect her. But she says that she doesn't get sick or hurt. Dizzy from the fever, he doesn't understand what she says and falls asleep. Tsukasa takes care of him all day, and when he wakes up, he asks her for a change of clothes because he is sweaty, and she offers to wipe the sweat off his back, and although it is very embarrassing, she does it. As she wipes his sweat, she scolds him, saying that he doesn't take care of himself. When they first met, he was hurt very badly and he still chased her, and now he doesn't take care of himself either and reminds him that he only has one life. At night, they go to sleep, and Tsukasa can't help but hug him, confessing that she worried a lot about him, and he kisses her to comfort her. But soon those kisses go up a level, and she scolds him because he is still weak and needs to rest. Then he confesses that he worked all night to finish on time because he wants to take her to the summer festival, and she wants to go too. But for that, he needs to rest, and they both fall asleep. The next day, Tsukasa tells Kaname about the summer festival, and she lends her yukatas for her and her husband since she knows that Nasa will go crazy when he sees Tsukasa wearing one. Later, when Nasa sees the yukata, he asks his wife to let him watch her put it on, and she allows him to. And just as Kaname predicted, Nasa loves the way the yukata looks on her and can't help but kiss her. She stops him by reminding him that they have to go to the summer festival, so he puts on his yukata too, and they leave. They first go to the food stalls and look for the most traditional takoyakis in town. Then they go to the game stalls and run into Aya and Chitose, who are in charge of the paper fishing stall. Tsukasa encourages her husband to try it, but he fails miserably on his first attempt. After that, they go to offer their prayers to the shrine, and Tsukasa asks for her husband's health. She tells Nasa that when she deems it necessary, she will stop him from getting sick because his life is very precious to her. This moves him, and they are about to kiss when suddenly they are interrupted by all of their friends. They say that the fireworks are about to start. They hold hands and go to watch the fireworks, both internally wishing to come back next year, and then the next, and the next until the end of their days. Days later, Nasa gives Tsukasa a smartphone and she happily takes a picture of him and uses it as a wallpaper. Then they save their contact information as a couple. After that, she learns how to use Line and runs to ask Kaname for her contacts, which shows her how to change her profile picture, and then Aya gives her contact information as well. Later, Nasa tells his wife that he is going to work with a friend who is an expert in manga and anime and was very supportive after his accident, and maybe he will spend the night with him working. As the hours pass, Tsukasa begins to feel lonely and Kaname suggests sending stickers to her husband, but she does not want to bother him while he works. Then Aya sees her sad and tells her that surely her husband is sending her a lot of stickers, but that's not the case and Tsukasa gets sadder. In the afternoon, Tsukasa looks at the photos and videos she has of Nasa and is happy to be able to have him like that, but that is not enough. At night, she sits looking at the moon and can't help but cry feeling alone. Suddenly, she receives a text from Nasa. He says that he misses her a lot, but he still has work to do and will return in the morning. That makes her a little angry, but she understands that his work is important. Then she gets ready to sleep, and without realizing it, she sets up the 2 Fubins and convinces herself that she did it because maybe her husband will return in the middle of the night. Hours later, it is 4 in the morning and Nasa staggers home. He is very tired and is surprised to see his wife awake. She couldn't sleep, so when he lays down on the futon, she gives him a goodnight kiss. Shocked and blushing, Nasa wonders what's wrong with his cool wife and then gets even more shocked when she asks for another goodnight kiss. Not missing his chance, he climbs on top of her and kisses her passionately, and she asks him to hold her tightly, confessing that she missed him so much. He missed her too, so he hugs her tightly. The next morning, Tsukasa blushes as she remembers all the cheesy things she said to her husband, and this is noticed by Kaname, who tries to coax out all the juicy details from last night. When Nasa wakes up and goes to check on his wife, he blushes at the sight of her, and this confirms Kaname's suspicions. She is sure that they had fun last night like the newly couple that they are. This is overheard by Charlotte, who brings the gossip to Chitose, and the blonde tries not to get angry since Nasa and Tsukasa are married and it's normal for them to do such things. That night, Charlotte asks Aurora if she would like to hold her hand while they sleep, but before she can answer, Charlotte tells her that she was joking. Meanwhile, at the bathhouse, Tsukasa and Nasa are blushing heavily at bedtime, and even more so when he asks her for a goodnight kiss and she kisses him passionately again. Days later, Nasa is woken up with a kiss by Tsukasa and he says that he still isn't used to waking up like that every day. Season 2, sometime later, Nasa wakes up disoriented and is greeted with a kiss on the cheek by his wife, something he still hasn't gotten used to. One day, he was working hard typing data while listening to Tsukasa complain about a shark movie, and to make up for her displeasure with it, he suggests going to the movies. They choose a random movie and Tsukasa has a great time. If there's one thing she loves, it's movies. In the afternoon, Kaname congratulates him for making his wife happy and asks if they're not going to have a wedding, and he hasn't thought about it yet, so Kaname makes him imagine how pretty Tsukasa would look in a wedding dress. In the evening, Nasa asks Tsukasa if she wants a wedding, and she surprisingly says no, but he does want to. He wants to see her in a pompous wedding dress. Tsukasa then asks him if he knows how to organize a wedding, and he thinks it's something simple, and is scolded by Kaname, who appears out of nowhere with a watermelon. While they eat the watermelon, Kaname tells Nasa that he knows nothing about weddings, and shows him how much a simple wedding cost. When Nasa sees how many zeros the wedding would cost, he is shocked, saying that with that money he can buy a car or a house. Meanwhile, Chitose practices boxing with her maids. They tell her that Tsukasa and Nasa were talking about their wedding, and Chitose thinks it's a good idea for them to get married. She wants her grandmother Tokiko to see Tsukasa dressed as a bride. Later, Nasa is still calculating how much a small wedding will cost, and Aya overhears him and tells him that he knows nothing about weddings. A wedding is not planned overnight, but it takes at least a year to arrange everything. At that moment, Tsukasa comes out of the bathroom and says that arranging the decorations, food, and invitations takes a lot of time. Then Aya tells them that they should buy a magazine specialized in weddings from the convenience store. Fortunately, they have to go to the convenience store to buy groceries, and in the process, they buy the wedding magazine. At the park, they share an ice cream and read the magazine. It says that sometimes couples fight during the preparations for the wedding and the wedding is canceled. This scares Nasa, and Tsukasa says that this would never happen to them, but she prefers to wait. They are now enjoying the joys of being newlyweds, going to the movies, sharing ice cream, or just looking at the moon, and Nasa agrees to wait a little longer to arrange a wedding. Later, they hug each other to sleep, and he confesses that he would like to see her dressed as a bride even without the ceremony, and she promises to model one just for him, and he loves the idea of that being their private wedding, and they seal their pact with a kiss. Days later, at a high school, a teacher complains about her student's poor academic performance. Although this is normal, the only exception was her star student Nasa. Miss Yanaji is a strict teacher and very dedicated to her teaching life, so much so that she doesn't even think of accepting a date from Taniguchi. One night, she goes to the convenience store and runs into Nasa. She thought he was living a life worthy of a genius, but instead she sees his wedding ring and thinks he became a gangster and married a fellow gang member. Then, she demands that he introduce her to his wife. After she is shocked to see how cute Tsukasa is, and not only that, she cooks deliciously and is polite. Miss Yanaji enjoys the food so much that she realizes that she hasn't eaten a hot meal in a long time. After eating, she asks Nasa what he will do for his future, and he says that he only thinks about spending time with his lovely wife because the most important thing is to enjoy the present. Later, on the way home, Miss Yanaji thinks about how to enjoy the present and decides to accept the outing to the amusement park, the Taniguchi. The next day, Kanane thanks Tsukasa for taking care of the reception of the bathhouse. Suddenly, a boy dressed extravagantly enters in and demands to speak with Nasa, and they think that he is a Yakuza because he is rude, so Tsukasa gets defensive and says that she will not let him harm her husband. At that moment, Nasa enters and greets his cousin Ginga, which surprises the girls, but the one who's most surprised is Jinga, because Nasa introduces Tsukasa as his wife. It turns out that Jinga admires Nasa a lot because he is a genius and gives him advice on how to be better academically. Now Jinga can't stop staring at Tsukasa and tells Nasa that they should kiss in front of him to make their marriage official, because if it's true that they are married, Tsukasa will be like a sister to him, and he will put his life on the line to protect her from anything. Nasa doesn't mind, and although Tsukasa is embarrassed, she agrees to kiss her husband in front of them. But at the last second, Ginga stops them, blushing, saying that he believes them. Then Ginga tells him that he came for help. It turns out that he and his friends found a stray kitten and didn't know what to do with it. So Ginga brought it to Nasa because he used to have a cat many years ago. The first thing Nasa tells him is that they have to take him to the vet, so he and Tsukasa take him. The kitten is small and noisy, and while it is being checked by the vet, Nasa gives Jinga instructions on what to get for the kitten. Meanwhile, he and Tsukasa wait for the kitten. He says that they should take care of it for 3 months before giving it away, but Tsukasa proposes to adopt it and name it Toast. Nasa agrees to adopt it, so that night they take the kitten with them, and when they are sleeping, the kitten awakes Nasa to get food. The next morning, Tsukasa says that Toast trusts him to feed it, and that is a good thing. And he doesn't mind either because Toast is cute, and she asks who's cuter of the two and blushing approaches to kiss her, but they are interrupted by Kaname. At night, they take advantage of the privacy of their home to end the day with a kiss. In gratitude for taking care of the kitten, Jinga gives her tickets to the cutest and most fun amusement park in Tokyo. Tsukasa has never been to one, so she goes to sleep early to wake up early and go to the park. Unfortunately for them, the day dawns rainy and Nasa buys 2 cute raincoats for them. On the other hand, Aurora and Charlotte found out about the amusement park and brought Chitos to spy on them, but in reality, they also want to have fun. Meanwhile, the newlyweds first go to the cute horror house and Tsukasa is ecstatic with the ride. After that, they go to the space attraction, which recreates scenes from the most famous space movies. As they leave the attraction, they run into Miss Yanaji, who came with Taniguchi, and at first, Tsukasa thinks they are on a date, but Miss Yanaji fervently denies it and says that Taniguchi is just nice, is always inviting her to the movies or to dinner. This makes Tsukasa realize that Taniguchi is trying to woo Miss Yanaji, but she is dense and doesn't notice, so Tsukasa takes her husband and leaves so as not to interrupt Taniguchi's plan. Alone, Tsukasa tells Nasa that it is clear that Taniguchi has a master plan to woo Miss Yanaji and they must not interfere, so they spy on them from afar. First, they see Taniguchi trying to hold Miss Yanaji's hand, but he regrets it and doesn't do it. Then they go to the pirate ride and she takes his hand because she scares easily. Alone, Tsukasa and Nasa lose hope that Taniguchi will be able to tell Miss Yanaji about his feelings, but Nasa says that he can still do it during the fireworks at night. On the other hand, Taniguchi looks for the right moment to tell Miss Yanaji about his feelings, but he doesn't get his chance. Then they see a couple getting married at the amusement park, and even though it's raining, they smile, and Taniguchi says that it must be beautiful to be able to smile at times like this. Afterwards, they go to a restaurant inside the park, just like Tsukasa and Nasa. On the other hand, Chitos and her maids are having a great time at the park, and they bump into everyone at the restaurant, and the maids suggest that they disguise themselves so they don't get caught. While they spy on them incognito, they see them flirting shamelessly and also playing with the giant mascots of the park. Then everyone goes out to see the fireworks, and Miss Yanaji tells Taniguchi that it would be nice to share her life with someone, and he sees her so beautiful under the fireworks that he can't help but confess that he likes her. On the other hand, Chitos sees how Tsukasa and Nasa hold hands enjoying the moment and decides not to spy on them anymore. Days later, Tsukasa can't help but think that her husband is a reliable man, always willing to help anyone at any time of the day. And to prove her point, Kaname stops by and asks Nasa for help with her vacuum cleaner, and he fixes it in no time. Later, Aya stops by and begs Nasa to tutor her since he's a genius and she's about to fail the year, so he agrees to help her by making daily worksheets for her to practice for her exams. At last, a friend asks Nasa to help him program something, so he sits there typing for hours. He doesn't seem to notice, but he's stiff, and Tsukasa decides to give him a massage. The problem is that he's never received a massage, and just by feeling his wife's hands on his back, he blushes and only thinks about returning the favor. When she finishes massaging his back, she massages his hands and gives him a little kiss. Blushing all over, Nasa convinces his wife to let him massage her back. She is very shy and blushes easily, so he can't help but think she is cute. In the evening, Kaname asks Nasa a bunch of private questions since she has been learning about the types of kisses couples give each other. As Nasa looks confused, she explains to him that there are many types of kisses. For example, a kiss on the ear is submissive, a kiss on the neck indicates need, and a kiss on the palm of the hand is for supplication. Perplexed by all this information, Kaname gives him a list of all the types of kisses she found out. Later, Tsukasa tells Nasa that she has to go to the convenience store and he accompanies her. Then they go to the park and he can't help but sniff his wife's hair, and she tells him that if he wants to touch it, he just needs to ask. Excited, Nasa strokes her pink hair and compliments her, saying that it's silky. Then they go to the lake and see Miss Yanagi and Taniguchi kissing from afar, which makes them blush, and they end up hiding in some bushes and wait until they leave so they can escape. When they get home, they eat in silence, and while Nasa washes the dishes, Tsukasa goes to talk to Kaname, who wanted to give them some grapes. When she comes back, she shows him a list of different kiss spots that Kaname gave her, and the two decide to kiss according to the list, but in the end, he ends up kissing her stomach without knowing the meaning. The next day, the ever-curious Kaname asks Nasa how it went yesterday at the park with Tsukasa, and he is surprised at how often he is spied on. Days later, Kaname's mother gives Nasa 2 tickets to the hot springs in Kusatsu. They can use it as their honeymoon. The next day, Nasa and Tsukasa leave for Kusatsu, and she hopes that Chitose is not following them to crash their second honeymoon attempt, but what she doesn't know is that Chitose has matured and doesn't plan on following them this time. Later, the newlyweds arrive at Kusatsu and are shocked to see the inn. It is luxurious, huge, and has outdoor bathtubs. The first thing they do is soak in the bathtubs separately, and Nasa decides to do things right this time, so he starts to search his information about everything a couple can do in Kusatsu. After reading for a while, he gets out of the bathtub to check out the places, but runs into an old widow who needs help. On the other hand, Tsukasa enjoys the outdoor baths. Meanwhile, in Tokyo, Aya is tired of studying, and Kaname proposes a change of pace, and that makes Aya happy, until she realizes that it is all a trap so that she helps clean the bathrooms. And not only her, Kaname also called Chitose to help them and made her put on a swimsuit, which seems unnecessary to the blonde. Later, Nasa continues helping the old lady, and although he tries to escape, although he is so helpful that he can't do anything else but help her in whatever she wants. She says that she noticed his wedding ring and supposes that his wife must be very happy to marry someone as gentle as him, and not only that, she thinks that he loves his wife very much. At that moment, Tsukasa decides to get out of the bath and go in search of her husband, and finds him with an old lady who is none other than Tokiko, Chitose's grandmother. Tsukasa scolds Tokiko for tricking her husband, but she says that she just wanted to test him using her acting skills. Then Nasa says that he would like to formally introduce himself to Tokiko, and she takes them to her room, which is the largest in the inn. There, he introduces himself as Tsukasa's official husband, and Tokiko admits that she was very curious to know who melted Tsukasa's ice heart, and not only that, she is amazed that he is so smart as to realize that her precious treasure in the mansion was a moon rock, and she believes that he will be able to get what she couldn't all these years. Since he doesn't understand what she is talking about, Tokiko gives him a Kusatsu bingo. If he manages to complete the 3 most important tourist activities of the place, he will be an expert in hot springs. In response to Tsukasa's complaints, Tokiko also gives her advice. The old woman says that Tsukasa loves with all her heart but not with words, and tells her that the person she loves also wants to hear those words. Finally, Tokiko asks Nasa to take care of Tsukasa, and he promises it. Alone, Nasa jokes that Tokiko is right. He also wants to hear lovely words from her, and that makes Tsukasa blush. The next day, Nasa and Tsukasa go out to explore the main tourist attractions of Kusatsu. First, they visit the hot springs, and they eat local delicacies, and finally they end up at a river where mixed bathing is allowed. Nasa can't stop thinking about what it would be like to bathe with his wife in the open-air bathtub in their room, and it continually distracts him. Later, they return to the inn where a sumptuous feast awaits them. While they eat, Nasa works up the courage to ask Tsukasa to bathe together in the open-air bathtub, and she blushingly accepts. The two take off their clothes and blushing enter the hot water bathtub, and they don't know what to say to each other, so Tsukasa encourages him to tell her whatever he wants because only he is allowed to tell her certain things. Then Nasa openly tells her that he loves her and she looks beautiful in the moonlight. He expects her to say the same and reminds her of Tokiko's advice, so she blushes and tells him that she loves him too. After that, the two of them don't know what else to say to each other because they are very embarrassed and they stay in the hot water for a long time until they get dizzy. The next day, Nasa wakes up after a pleasant dream where he and his wife shared the outdoor bathtub, although that really happened. While they eat breakfast, Nasa notices that his wife is a little distant and realizes that it is because she is not used to saying her thoughts out loud. After breakfast, they decide to take a last walk before returning to Tokyo, and Tsukasa wants to leave quickly so as not to say goodbye to Tokiko. But the old woman is smarter and was waiting for them at the gates. She insists on taking pictures with them and asks them when the wedding ceremony will be, but that is not yet decided. Finally, they walk around the city once more looking for souvenirs and then take the train home. He says that he had a great time and would like to share a bath with her even if it is not in the hot springs, and she accepts as long as they turn off the lights, but he prefers to have them on because he likes to see her cute blushing face. Sometime later, the summer is heating up Tokyo, and the house where Tsukasa and Nasa live has a broken air conditioner, so Nasa decides to buy a new one. They first ask Kaname for permission to install one in the house, and she tells them that installing it takes at least 2 weeks after buying it because the technicians have a full schedule. Then Nasa decides to install it himself, and with Tsukasa they go to buy one. He doesn't need to compare prices or quality. He knows what AC he wants and buys it. After that, they go to a tool rental house to install the air conditioner, and they run into an ex-classmate of Nasa. She is Nakiri. Nasa tells her that he got married, and at first she doesn't react because of the shock, and when she does, she gives them a wedding gift and tells Tsukasa that she never thought that Nasa would get married because he was never interested in romance. Nasa admits that it is true and says that he only has romance in his life now thanks to his lovely wife. After that, they go home and Nasa installs the AC, and they enjoy it to the fullest before turning it off and going to sleep. A few minutes later, they wake up feeling hot, and Nasa sets the timer to turn off in an hour. Unfortunately, that doesn't work for them either because after a few minutes they wake up feeling cold. Then Nasa turns up the temperature on the AC, and after a few minutes, Tsukasa starts feeling hot, so he regulates the temperature again. An hour later, the AC turns off and Tsukasa wakes up feeling hot and turns it back on, and Nasa says that there is no reason to turn it off, so they sleep with the AC on all night. The next day, while Tsukasa is tidying up the reception area of the bathhouse, a girl approaches her thinking she's Kaname and asks for help with the summer festival, and Tsukasa looks at her confused because she doesn't know her. The girl realizes that she is not Kaname and still continues to tell her about her problems, which exasperates Tsukasa because the girl is infuriating and talks nonsense. Luckily for Tsukasa, Kaname comes home from school and the girl is happy to see her. She's Kuma, her classmate. Kaname asks her confused why she didn't go to class today, and that shocks Kuma. It turns out she didn't go to class because she thought summer break started today. Kuma keeps talking about various things and nothing at the same time, so Kaname doesn't know what she needed her help with. At that moment, Nasa arrives, who knows the distracted Kuma from before, and he formally introduces her to his wife Tsukasa. Kuma is shocked by the news but calms down and congratulates them. After that, Nasa goes to return the tools to Nakiri, and the girls stay with Kuma, who still hasn't told Kaname what he needs from her. Exasperated, Kaname asks him why she came, but Kuma won't say anything without an ice cream, so she runs to buy one. On the other hand, Nasa gives the tools to Nakiri. She still can't believe that a former classmate of hers is already married and asks him if getting married is a good thing. Nasa is honest and says that it depends on the person you marry. For example, he loves Tsukasa a lot. She is cute, intelligent, smells good, likes cute things, and drinks warm water. But above all, she expands his world. Being with her made him experience, feel, and meet new people. Every day with her is as if his world gets bigger. Nakiri is fascinated by what he tells her and internally wonders if it is time to get married. Days later, Tsukasa asks her husband if he loves her, and he says yes. Puzzled by her question, he runs to ask Kaname for advice, who doesn't hesitate to scold him. Girls are supposed to hear declarations of love a lot, but married women can only hear that from their husbands, so it's his duty as Tsukasa's husband to tell her that he loves her every day at all hours. Perplexed, Nasa tries to practice how to say, "I love you," all the time to Tsukasa, and it's not an easy thing because he didn't usually talk about his feelings before. So he decides to tell her as soon as they wake up, but when he does, he cringes and decides to practice more by reading shoujo manga. Days later, Tsukasa notices that her husband won't stop reading manga and decides to distract him. First, she puts the cat on him, and then she suggests doing massages, which end in tickling. After that, she kisses him and asks him why he's so focused on reading manga, and he confesses that he's studying how to express his feelings, but he ended up getting hooked on the plot. Then she says that she wants to hear how much he's practiced, and he blushes and tells her that he loves her more than anything in the universe, and that makes her blush, but with happiness. Later, Kaname sees that Nasa is taking a bath and tells him that Tsukasa is in the bathroom next door. He can go with her without being interrupted because the bathhouse has already closed its doors to customers. Tsukasa, who was listening to everything, says that she will only accept if he turns off the lights, and Kaname wishes him luck. Nasa enters the bathtub and can't help but admire her body, so she asks him not to stare at her because she is embarrassed, and then they kiss in the dark. After that, they enter the sauna and Tsukasa tries not to have thoughts about his wife, even if it is for 5 minutes. Unlike him, Tsukasa enjoys the sauna and says that she stays for a long time and explains that the first 3 minutes are the hardest because it is when the body gets used to the heat, and asks him to stay with her. Barely 2 minutes pass and Nasa can't take it anymore, so he decides to distract himself from the heat by taking his wife's hand and then putting his arm around her shoulders. She says that if he does that, her towel will fall off, and he doesn't think that's a bad thing, so she gives him permission to take the towel off of her. But suddenly, they hear screams. It turns out that Aya went to one of the saunas and found Ginga, who had fallen asleep there, and she freaked out when she saw him. Nasa noticed that Tsukasa was angry at the interruption, so he internally promises himself to go to the sauna together again. Days later, Tokiko remembers how she met Tsukasa. Tokiko was just a little girl when her house was destroyed in the war. Wounded and hungry, she was wandering through the rubble when she came across Tsukasa, who gave her a bag of ohajis. Currently, Tsukasa has trouble adapting to technology. She's only good at video games. For example, she keeps forgetting her cell phone pin, and Nasa is the one who reminds it for her. And he asks how she handled it before she married him, and she confesses that Tokiko was always the one who took care of those things. Tsukasa thinks that her husband thinks she's a dummy, so she is offended and says that she will only forgive him if he buys a cake, and he happily runs to buy one, happy to have a cute wife. In the afternoon, they receive a visit from Miss Yanagi. She came to tell them that she is going to marry Taniguchi, and she is worried. She asked Nasa if he had any worries before they got married, and he happily says no. He could only think how fabulous Tsukasa was. Then Miss Yanagi says that she started having worries when they recently went out to eat ramen, and Taniguchi put pickled red ginger in his. He said that he did it because he read it in a manga, but he didn't like the way it tasted, so he encouraged Miss Yanagi to try it, and she confessed to him that she didn't like it either. The problem is that 2 days later, she craved ramen with pickled red ginger, and she doesn't know how to tell Taniguchi, since he likes a girl who doesn't like red ginger, but now Miss Yanagi does. A little dizzy from the problem, Nasa advises her to tell this to her boyfriend. He is sure that he will not stop loving her. Thankful for his advice, Miss Yanagi leaves, and the newlywed couple go to the ramen stand to eat ramen with pickled red ginger. The next day, Nasa is shocked to see his weight. Since he got married, he has eaten carelessly because Tsukasa cooks exquisitely. She suggests cooking less, but he doesn't want to stop eating her food, so he says he will exercise enough so that he eats and doesn't gain weight. He says he is able to run 10 kilometers, but after a few meters, he starts to get tired due to be out of shape. So Tsukasa decides to accompany him to jog. Nasa is very tired, so he decides to stop and do chin-ups in the park, but he can't do even one. He says he wants to be strong to protect his wife, and that comforts Tsukasa, and she reminds him that she saved him the first time they met so she can take care of both of them. At night, Nasa cooks cold noodles, and they are surprised by Tokiko's visit. She accuses Tsukasa of not visiting her and suggests that they should go camping. Tsukasa thinks that this is a terrible idea. Unlike her, Nasa thinks it's a great idea, and Tokiko invites herself to the camping, and before leaving, she gives Tsukasa a pack of ohajis to share with her husband. He asks her why Tokiko gave her ohajis, and she says that once Tokiko was very happy when she gave them to her. Later, everyone is eating a delicious barbecue when suddenly, a stage appears, and Kaname says through the microphone that this is a wedding reception for the newlyweds, who look on in shock. The celebration begins with a montage telling the story of the two of them, how they met 2 years ago, the accident, and how he worked in several jobs looking for her until they finally met again and got married. Moved by the montage, Nasa agrees to give a thank you speech, which ends with him endlessly praising his wife, making her blush. Finally, Nakiri appears bringing a wedding cake, and Tokiko puts a veil on Tsukasa. She looks beautiful and smiling. The newlyweds cut the cake. After that, Nasa shows everyone through the telescope the stars and constellations, but them only see bright points, so Tsukasa brings fireworks to amuse them. So Kaname offers to make coffee for them, and Nasa thanks her for organizing this wonderful event and gets into romantic mode, talking philosophically about marriage. At that moment, Tokiko appears and says she wants to talk to him, and that puts Tsukasa on alert. She warns her she doesn't want Tokiko to say weird things to him. Alone, Tokiko tells him that it's her fault that he and Tsukasa didn't meet after the accident, and she didn't trust him, so she apologizes for having made them wait 2 years, and she advises him to ask Tsukasa alone why people get married. Then Nasa goes looking for his wife and finds her contemplating the moon in front of the river. He tells her what he talked about with Tokiko and asks her why people get married, and Tsukasa, smiling, says that people get married because they don't live forever. When a couple gets married, they promise to take care of each other in sickness and health, wealth and poverty, and joy and sadness. And that promise lasts forever, just like their love. That night, under the full moon in the starry sky, they promise to love each other forever. Finally, Kaname tells them that they will sleep in a tent away from everyone, and it is a romantic tent with an invisible roof so they can see the stars from the bed. They first drink soda and sit in silence on the sofa, and Mesa makes the first move by putting his arm around his wife and suggests they look at the stars lying down, and she blushes accepts. In the darkness, they look at the stars, and then he invites Tsukasa to put her head on his shoulder, and he takes advantage to sniff her neck, tickling her. The next morning, Nasa wakes up early to admire the sunrise, and Tokiko does the same. The two of them drink coffee with toast brought from Giza, according to Tokiko. The aroma of breakfast will attract Tsukasa. While they eat breakfast, Tokiko gets serious and wants to tell him something important, but is interrupted by Tsukasa, who woke up thanks to the smell of toast. The next day, Nasa frames the photo of the campsite and says that now he understands what wedding receptions are for. At that moment, everyone can show their happiness for the couple. Suddenly, Nasa receives a call from his landlord, and he tells her that his apartment is almost ready, so Nasa and Tsukasa decide to go take a look. The new apartment is bigger, it will have a bathtub for 2, and they will be able to buy a double bed, which makes them blush. After that, they go back home and start packing up their stuff in boxes to get ready for the move. This is seen by Kaname, who is not happy about them moving. She's going to miss them so much, and Tsukasa promises to keep working as a receptionist, and Nasa will work on his computer in the room, so it will be as if they never moved, which makes Kaname happy. At night, the couple goes out for a night walk, and he says he is nervous about moving. It is as if their marriage has just started, but living alone has its advantages. He can hug her whenever he wants, and he proceeds to hug her. Surprisingly, she breaks away from the hug and tells her husband that it is time to teach him how to hug. Since she is a short girl, he should put his arms over hers, not the other way around. When he hugs her, she feels like a cat being picked up. She then hugs him the right way, and he admits that it's better this way. She then asks him if he has any requests, and he asks if he can touch her while she's sleeping. She's a messy sleeper, so sometimes she'll pull the covers off or her pajamas will come unbuttoned. So he wants permission to put the covers on her or fix her pajamas. This shocks Tsukasa. She says that she's not a messy sleeper and accuses him of making things up. Meanwhile, at Tokiko's mansion, she looks at the moon rock and remorsefully remembers how Tsukasa told her 2 years ago that she would only give her 2 more years of her life because she had found her destiny. Tokiko is happy now for Tsukasa, but wishes she could have fulfilled her wish. The next day, Nessa looks at his wife. Her pajamas are unbuttoned and the covers are a mess, and he almost takes a picture of her to prove that she is a messy sleeper, but suddenly, Tsukasa's cell phone rings. She answers half asleep and listens worriedly as Chitose tells her that Tokiko fainted last night and is now in the hospital. They run to see her and find her eating donuts. She tells them that she is fine and just got a little dizzy and gets out of bed to go get a coffee, leaving her manual video game console to Tsukasa so that she can raise her levels. Nasa does not believe Tokiko's excuse and runs to look for her and finds her sitting. He tells her that he realized that something is wrong because her stride is shorter than the one he saw on the mountain. He then asks her what she wanted to tell him in the mountains, and she says that she has had a mission for years, but she couldn't carry it out, and she hopes that he will, and she gives him the moon rock. He is shocked at the magnitude of the moment, but she says that it is just a rock, it has no powers, and it is normal. And even though it costed to obtain it, it is still a rock, and asks him to make Tsukasa happy. He promises that he will, and she says that a great weight has left her shoulders. At that moment, Tsukasa arrives and accuses Tokiko of filling her husband's head with strange things, but on the contrary, he only says that he has promised to make her happy, and that makes her blush. Smiling, Tokiko pushes Tsukasa into her husband's arms, and they hug each other happily. High school days. Sometime later, Miss Yanaji goes to visit Nasa and tells him about the government giving out computers at the girls' high school where she works, but she is terrible at teaching computer programming, so she asks him to give her a hand. He is not a teacher, so he is not sure about accepting, but she tells him that she has not been able to move forward with her wedding plans because of these classes, and that convinces him to accept the job. Days later, he goes to the girls' high school, which causes a huge uproar among them because he is only 18 years old and already married. Before his class ends, he tells his students that they can ask him for help whenever they want. During the break, the first one who approaches him is Kurenai. She wants to ask him for romantic advice because he is already married, therefore he understands women. Nasa is not sure he can help her, but he listens to her anyway. Kurenai explains that her boyfriend is a player, is always cheating on her. This shocks Nasa, but she clarifies that he cheats on her with video game characters because he prefers to play video games instead of going out on dates with her. He is relieved that Kurenai is not being cheated on and tells her that her boyfriend is probably just nervous about being a boyfriend. Suddenly, Yusa appears and asks Nasa the kanji for his name, and he explains that it comes from Starry Sky, which makes them laugh, but they say that at school there is another girl with a wild name like him. After that, Nasa returns home and tells his wife everything. Meanwhile, on the roof of the school, a group of friends gather to talk about the new teacher. They are Kurenai, Yusa, Inukai, Shirogane, Miyako, Jessie, and the princess of the school, Kaguya. On the weekend, Hanami tells Nasa that he can make his wife jealous so she'll act cuter. He doubts that Tsukasa is jealous of high school girls, but Kaname insists that Tsukasa would look cuter being jealous. Coincidentally, Aya tells Tsukasa the same thing. She says that Nasa would love to see her jealous of high school girls. A jealous scene would make her look cute, and that would have him at her mercy. At night, they go out for a night walk, and Tsukasa asks Nasa if there are any cute girls in class, and he decides not to follow Kaname's advice and tells her that he will never like another girl in life. For him, there is only her, and showers her with compliments. The next day, Nasa talks to the principal, vice principal, and Miss Yanaji. He says that the results of the programming class are pretty dire, and according to his calculations, they can improve, and shows them comparative graphs of each student. The principal asks him if he can make those graphs measuring the performance of the students in other subjects, and he says yes. Excited by the idea of improving the performance of the students, she says that she will hire him as an educator. After that, Miss Yanaji and Nasa walk through the halls of the school and find an empty classroom where Nasa realizes that someone wrote the formula for how to go to the moon, and he completes the equation by writing how to return to Earth. At night, Nasa tells Tsukasa that there is a smart girl at school, and suddenly, Kurenai appears with a message from Kaguya. She tells Nasa to stay out of her business. Days later, Tsukasa tells her husband that she's craving ramen, and he does too, so the two of them go to the next spicy ramen place. On the other hand, Miyako reflects on how she never felt satisfied with her life, and that's why she became evil. She's a ramen influencer and critic under her secret name Haru. She goes to a spicy ramen place and wants to try this super new extra spicy ramen. There she is placed at Nasa and Tsukasa's table and is surprised to meet her teacher's cute wife. She is so fascinated by the couple that she reminds herself that she came to try the new extra spicy ramen. Coincidentally, Tsukasa also orders that extra spicy ramen. For Miyako, the ramen is delicious, but Tsukasa thinks it's too spicy, and Nasa, being the gentleman that he is, exchanges his less spicy ramen for hers. And that romantic interaction makes Miyako blush. The next day, while Nasa grades some papers, he marvels at how smart Kaguya is. On the other hand, Aya tells Tsukasa that it's normal to feel uneasy because your husband works at a girls' high school, and even though Tsukasa doesn't feel that way, she is convinced to wear a high school uniform for him. When Nasa sees her, he gets shocked and blushes. He wants to go shopping with her or walk around and take lots of pictures. But Tsukasa doesn't want anyone else to see her like that, so he takes her behind the house and tells her that he would never be interested in high school girls because his wife is cuter, and kisses her. Days later, Aya comes up with the idea of draining a pond, and her sister scolds her for looking at weird trends, but Aya says she wants to do it and runs to ask Nasa if he can dig a pond for her and then drain it. Nasa is not quite sure what she wants, but thinks it would be fun to dig a pond. In the afternoon, he starts digging under the watchful eyes of his wife. She wants to see him sweaty and manly, but at first he has trouble and doesn't know how to use the shovel, so he searches on the internet how to do it. After hours of digging, Tsukasa gives him iced tea. He drinks it so coolly that she blushes, thinking that her husband is handsome. The next day, Nasa has sore muscles and runs into Kurenai and her friends who want tutoring. So in the afternoon, the girls go to the bathhouse under the excuse of tutoring, but in reality, they wanted to meet their teacher's cute wife. When they see her, they can't help but gossip about how cute and pretty she is, and that leads them to wonder what the couple will be like in intimacy. After that, they watch the bath and the sauna in fascination and decide to compete. Whoever lasts the longest will win. Yusa wins while Miyako barely lasts a few minutes. After that, they decide that they are too tired to study, so they promise to come back another day. When they leave, Tsukasa tells her husband that all those girls are cute, and he says that she is cuter. A week later, the pond is ready, and Aya celebrates because it's time to drain it, shocking everyone because they thought she was joking. Days later, Nasa receives a love message from Shirogane, which is immediately deleted, but Tsukasa sees it and gets angry, although it was clearly a mistake. The next day, Shirogane corners Nasa and tells him that yesterday's love message wasn't for him, but for another boy, and tells him that a few days ago, she and Kurenai went to Kurenai's boyfriend's apartment because he wasn't going to school because he was playing video games, and at that moment, his class rep came to see him and beat him up. Seeing that manly boy, she fell in love with him and they exchanged contact information, and she wanted to confess her feelings to him, but ended up sending that message to Nasa. Nasa is relieved to know the true story behind that message, but his relief doesn't last long. She wants to know how to confess to her crush in person. Later, Nasa tells Shirogane's story to Tsukasa and asks her what he should advise his student, and Tsukasa gets serious and says that it all depends on how good the strategy is. The first thing Shirogane should do is spy on his crush to find out his weaknesses, and then attack his weak points so that love can blossom. Nasa thinks that this is stalking, but Tsukasa says that it's not stalking if a cute girl does it. The next day, Jinga goes to the bathhouse and tells Tsukasa and Aya that he feels like someone is spying on him, as if someone wants to find out his weak points. Tsukasa says that he should be careful of stalkers, and Aya offers to accompany him, even though they don't get along very well. On the other hand, Shirogane wants to show Nasa who his crush is and takes him to the place where he always passes by to go to school, but warns him that they should hide because she doesn't want him to see her with his teacher and get the wrong ideas. Suddenly, Shirogane says that his crush is approaching, and it is none other than Gingo walking next to Aya. With her heart broken, Shirogane runs and Nasa goes after her. He calms her down, saying that Jinga is his cousin and Aya is just a friend. That relieves Shirogane, and she says that these tears confirm her love for him, and Nasa advises her to confess her feelings in some private and secluded place. Meanwhile, Aya and Jinga keep walking, and she complains that she doesn't feel like they are being spied on, and Jinga agrees with her and says that the best way to catch a stalker is to capture him in a private and secluded place. When she is behind him, Ginga says that he knew his stalker would come and punches a boy who appeared out of nowhere. He was stalking Ginga all this time. After that, Shirogane tells Ginga that she likes him and he just thanks her. At night, Nasa tells Tsukasa everything that happened today, and she agrees that being a high school teacher is rough. The next day, Nasa goes to work and Tsukasa can't shake the feeling of jealousy. Although she advises herself that jealousy comes from lack of trust, and she trusts her husband 100%. But she admits that high school girls are cute. Later, Yusa and Kurenai ask Nasa if his wife doesn't mind him working at an all-girls high school, and he assures them that she's cool with him working here. But Yusa says that girls are unpredictable. For example, Kaguya is currently cutting bamboo, and maybe Tsukasa is the possessive type. At that moment, Nasa catches Tsukasa spying on him from the gates, and when she gets caught, she runs and he runs after her. She says that she felt lonely at home, and he says that he feels the same way, although he still has one more hour of work left. So he hugs her from behind, and when he is about to kiss her, they are interrupted by Yusa and Kurenai. After that, Tsukasa returns home and goes through the bamboo tunnel. There she meets Kaguya, who cryptically asks her if her long journey is over, which shocks Tsukasa.